In the last section, we put together the core of the Node.js web application. If you didn't follow along in the last section and you just copy pasted the code, just make sure that you've got your index.js file and a package.json file. You'll also want to make sure that you've got your terminal open inside of your project directory. And so if I list out my current files and folders, I should see the index.js and package.json files. Okay, so we've got some source code here, and now we need to figure out how we can wrap this all up inside of a Docker container. I want to first begin by telling you a little bit about Node.js and how we're going to start up this application. So just in case you've never made use of Node before, 2 commands that you need to be aware of to install dependencies and start up this application. Anytime that we want to start up a Node app, we have to first install a set of dependencies. And we can install all of our dependencies by running a command npm install inside of our project directory. This starts up a little program called npm, which is somewhat colloquially known as the Node Package Manager. This is going to run that program and install a couple of dependencies for us, and of course it assumes that npm is installed on our local machine, or inside the container, as the case may be. The other thing to be aware of is that we're going to have to eventually start our server up, and to do so, we're going to run the command npm start at the terminal as well. And again, this also kind of assumes that npm is already installed. All right, so with all this in mind, let's now start thinking about the Docker file that we have to put together. Now, the series of operations that we are going to put into the Docker file is going to end up looking very similar to what we did in the last application. So in this somewhat complicated diagram, our template that we're kind of following here for our Docker file is to specify a base image, run some command to install some dependencies, which definitely sounds like something we have to do, and then specify the command to run on startup, which, as we just discussed, is that npm start thing. Now, when we were working on the Redis image, we said from Alpine to specify the base image, we ran apk add redis to install the dependency, and then we set up the default command as Redis server. And so it really seems like we have some very direct parallels this time around. I think that for the Node application, we could probably do a Docker file that specifies Alpine as our base image. We can then run npm install to install all of our dependencies, and then we can set up the default command of npm start to run the server when the container first comes online. So we're going to take this type of approach right here by creating a Docker file and then essentially putting almost exactly these instructions inside of it. Now, quick disclaimer here. Remember, I had said we're going to do a few things here slightly wrong, just so you can see some very common error messages that you are just about guaranteed to see on your own personal projects. So maybe in this discussion or the series of steps that I just described, there might be something in here that doesn't quite line up with what's reality or what we really have to do, okay? All right, so let's get started. I'm going to begin by making sure I've got my code editor open based on that simple web directory. And inside of here, I'm going to make a new Docker file. Remember, it's Docker with a capital D, and there is no file extension on there. Then inside of here, we're going to first specify our base image. And just to be really complete, I'm going to add in some comments for these steps just to remind you what we're doing every step along the way. So I'll say specify a base image. And you know what? Let's use that Alpine image again. It really seemed like it worked out last time for us. Next up, we're going to install some dependencies. To do so, we will run the command npm install. Like I just said, the npm install command is how we install dependencies on a Node.js project. And then finally, we will set up a default command, which we can do by running out cmd. And then we put down a set of square brackets, and then in a set of double quotes, we separately list out all the parts of the command that we want to run when the container is first created. And so to start up our server, we are probably going to want npm start, like so. Notice that I've got a comma between those two strings. All right, I think this looks pretty good. It definitely looks very similar to what we did for Redis. So let's now flip back over to our terminal and see what happens when we try to build this image. So I'm going to list out my files and folders and verify that I now see the Docker file inside of here. And then remember, to build an image, we can run docker build, and then we put the dot in there to specify the build context of the current directory. So I'll run that, and then we very quickly see npm not found. All right, so first problem of a couple that we're going to see. So let's take a quick pause right here. We're going to start to investigate why we are seeing this error and fix it up. So quick break and I'll see you in just a minute.